Hey guys, Dave here. Welcome to Computer Hobbyist. Today I'm going to show you how to create a button in Monogame. A lot of people are surprised that Monogame doesn't have a button built into it. Well, it's got to be compatible with different architectures and stuff, so that might be why, or maybe there's some reason I don't know about. But anyhow, it's not too difficult to create a button, so let's create one. First, we're going to create a new project here. I'm using Visual Studio 2019 for Mac. That's why it looks a little bit different than probably what you're used to. Project name, just remove me. Alright, let's see what we got in here. Not too much, as we probably suspected. So first thing we're going to go do is go to Content and go to the MGCB editor. In the Visual Studio for Mac, it's built into Visual Studio. We'll actually add it to Visual Studio. It's not a separate application. So let's go there and let's add some existing items. Let's add these two, close button and close button clicked. Alright, now we got to add a sound. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a button, and we click on the button will animate, and then it will you'll hear a clicking noise. So let's find a clicking noise on here to use. Oops, not new item, I meant existing item. Here we go, click that wave. That'll be a clicking noise we can use. And they're added, so let's go back to the solution here. Alright, we have a little framework for the game1.cs that we'll add to, but first there's a class we want to add. The class is called OneShotMouseButton.cs. Alright, so I'm not going to sit here and type everything in and make you bored out of your mind while you're watching me type everything in. I will paste it in to make things go a little bit quicker. So we add in some static fields here. We're keeping track of the current mouse state and previous mouse state. Looks like we need some libraries too. Let's add those. Using Microsoft.xna.input .framework.input rather. So Constructor, we're not putting anything in there, but we do have some methods. First method here, we will use this to get the mouse state whenever we need it. And these are all static, so you don't have to create an instance of the class. Alright, this tells you what button was pressed on the mouse. This checks if a button has not been pressed. The whole point of this is if you click on a button and you don't have a class like this, let's say you click on it and you click on it for 1/10 of a second, well then it's going to register 6 times that you click the button because the update runs 60 times a second. So with the one-shot mouse button class, if you click on it, it won't register another click until you've let go of the mouse button and clicked it again, so you always get one discrete click. It's kind of like the one-shot keyboard class that I showed you guys in a previous tutorial. Let's save that. Let's first add the libraries here. Alright, so we're using system.collections.generic because we're going to be using a list, and the rest is just monogame stuff. Alright, and then let's add our fields here. Alright, so you see there, it's not recognizing button. That's because we have to create the button class, so let's create it. Alright, so let's add the fields here, or the properties rather. So we're keeping track of the static texture and the click texture. What happens with the button is when it's clicked, the border changes from white to yellow. So in the static one, it's white. On the yellow one, it is yellow. All right, we're keeping track of animation time, the name of the button, point dimensions, the dimensions of the button, and let's see what else we have here. We're keeping track of an ID, layer depth, so we can choose what layer it's going to be on. So you want it on a high layer, so it'll be on top of everything generally. And then visible just says whether the button's currently visible or not. Position where it's at. And here's the texture. This is the texture that's used in the sprite batch. And then you keep track of cell width and cell height. All right, so let's do the constructor first. We actually have to add some few libraries up here. There we go. And let's fill in the constructor. The actual cell width and cell height, you don't critically need those. You can just use dimensions. It's just so when you're accessing it, you don't have to do like dimensions.x. It's just faster to type cell width and cell height, so you can leave those out if you want. All right, so it's setting the static texture, the click texture, the current texture, which is the static texture. That's how it starts out. And then the cell width and cell height are set. And the layer depth gets from here. And animation time is 0. If animation time is 0, it means it's not currently animating. If it's 30, that means it's going to animate for a half a second. Here it's putting the name in the property, position in the property, and your dimensions. So we got to add a clicked method now. So when it's clicked, it sets the animation time to 30 and sets the texture to the click texture, so then it will have the yellow background. And then the update will run the next thing I'm putting here, 60 times a second. Update button, so that's always running. If animation type equals 0, texture just stays the static texture. Otherwise, it just runs down the animation time until it gets to 0. Let's save that and go back to our game 1. All right, let's put some variables in here, or excuse me, fields and stuff in here. All right, so it's just instantiating sound effects and then giving quarantine button position. That's the button we're going to create, vector 2, 100, 100. So that's the position of it in the window. And one-shot mouse state equals one-shot mouse buttons dot get state. It's getting the mouse state right there. And mouse left pressed equals false initially. All right, let's go to load content. Instantiating the sprite batch, and then quarantine button is being created here, adding the textures and so forth, and the size of the button. It's 90 wide and 26 high, and its position, which is set up here, quarantine button position. And what else do we have there? 33, that one that's the ID for it. And then visible is true, and there's your layer. It's going on the top layer. All right, so we got load content done. So we're going to create handle input now. This will be called by the update method. We'll get to the update method in a minute. All right, so let's get in game time. And then it's getting the mouse state by using the one-shot mouse buttons.getState. And if the left button is pressed, then it checks if it has not been pressed previously, and then it will set mouse left pressed equals to true, which will be used by the update. All right, let's add all this in here. All right, here's where it's calling handle input and setting it game time. And then it's running the update button once every 60 times a second for the quarantine button. That's used to keep track of where it is in the animation frame. So it starts at 30, and then each time that's called, next time will be 29, 28, 27, blah, 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 until it gets to 0. And here this just ends the program. If you hit escape, or if on your gamepad you click the back button, it'll just exit the program. And if the mouse left button is pressed, it does this. It sets it to false then. And then you'll check if button was clicked, and if it is, you'll play a sound effect, which is the click sound, and then you'll run the quarantine button.clicked method. Let's go there. Yeah, here it is. So it sets the animation time to 30 and sets the new texture. All right, so looks like we still got to do the draw, and we got to do the check if button was clicked. Let's do the check if button was clicked first. All right, so it's just checking the position of the button and the position of where your mouse was when it was clicked. And if your mouse is inside the button's position, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. If you have like 10 buttons, you can do this in a loop. And then instead of returning true and false, you would return like the ID of the button that was clicked or something, and return probably null if no button was clicked. All right. So that's there. So let's go to the draw. Don't worry, we're almost done adding the code here, and then we can test it out. All right, so we need a source rectangle and a destination rectangle. We're just adding those there. One thing you're probably asking is, why did you use 2 textures for the button instead of just using a sprite sheet? Well, it's because I have a rule I've set for myself. If an animation has less than 3 frames, which would be 2 or 1, don't use a sprite sheet. If it has more than 2 frames, I use a sprite sheet. Since this only has 2 frames, I'm not using a sprite sheet. You could if you want to, though. It's up to you. But all right, so we got our source and destination rectangle figured out here. And then we're doing our sprite batch.begin, and here's where we're drawing the button. One thing I want to point out, since this is just an example, I put these 2 in the draw method, but if this was like a production product I was creating, I would actually put I would put these in the update method, so there's not any calculations being done during the draw step, because the draw step only runs once every 60 seconds. And if it takes longer than 1/60th of a second to run, it just stops. And then it will run again the next time it's called, but it will start from the beginning then. Whereas the update method, if the update method is not completed within 1/60th of a second, it skips the next draw method and then continues with the update. So anything that's going to use processing power like math and stuff, it's a good idea to put it in the update instead. But let's try it out now, see if I have any errors here, if it's actually going to work. Content file was not found. Oh, you know what? Because I used the, I know what I did wrong here. I used close button instead of quarantine button. My mistake. I got all these buttons on some game I'm making. All right, here we go. We should probably change the name here to close. All right, very good. All right, so we got our close button there, but we put in the wrong size for it. But we'll click on it and see it does animate and it creates the clicking noise, but let's put in the correct size here. Close button. Oh, that doesn't give me the dimensions there. Let's find the dimensions for it. So the dimensions are 46 by 26. So let's try that there. 46 by 26. Oh, there we go. Yeah, perfect. All right, so we'll click it and it'll turn yellow and create the clicking noise. And as you notice, it stays yellow for a half a second. So that's the simplest way to create a button. There's many other ways to do it, but this simple way works for me. So just wanted to show you guys this. Thanks for watching and have a good evening.